I think it could have been handled much better on both sides. In a certain sense that the whole uproar basically became public and it was very difficult for both parties to maneuver and come to a truce in a certain sense. Given what then happened is that, I think for members of the public it became even more difficult because the situation is quite confusing. For example, the questions I've had from members of the public would be, under what circumstances do you ask someone to license, for example? How is this different from, say, the Yahoo situation or that of other sites, in which these are more professional sites, in terms of, they come under the Broadcast Act as well, and you deal with different types of licensing criteria. So I think it's important that a few things, that cleared up, I suppose, to a certain sense. One of the reasons why MDA approached Bertha and the Breakfast Network was because there was word that she was setting up a company, basically meaning that there is an intention for her to take the company, to the organisation, to be a profit-making organisation as a company. And that sort of entity basically, I suppose, when you deal with politics, I think then this age-old policy kicks in the sense that you don't want foreign interference, because I think it goes back to the point where it is clear that politics in Singapore remains for Singaporeans. That's where the root of it all started. So I think that's where MDA comes from, in the sense that, Bertha herself, if you look at all her postings, she's come out public and said that up to then, MDA has not come down on her on any of her articles or interfered with any of her postings as yet. So the issue is not so much about content, it's really about funding and the source of funding. Right? So I think that's the crux of the whole matter. Yes and no. Or you just need to declare funding and financing. I do empathise with Bertha. In a certain sense, she's a veteran journalist who knows where the boundaries are. She's not done anything defamatory. I think it was unfortunate, in my own opinion, that she decided not to register a license and decided to close down. But I can also understand, from one who has certain ideals or certain vision to what she wants to do, it might seem like a matter of principle. I think what it will primarily expose them to would be, who your editors are and where your funding comes from. Those are mainly where I think people will be concerned with. I would think that she would have thought about this, knowing the landscape, and knowing where politics stand. I suppose only she can answer herself. But if it's a matter of principle, then of course something I can understand as well. To a certain sense, sometimes with writers you do want certain form of I suppose creative license and not be too bothered with licensing and having to declare who my editors are, who's been helping me in the background, for example. So to a certain sense, there may be certain limitations in its current form, but I'm not sure. I think she's the best person to answer that. But at the same time, I think whatever the reasons are, this could have been handled better, of course. This is a new policy. I mean, it's not a new policy, but it's a new process. It could have been fine-tuned for the online media space, because the same policy had also applied to the mainstream media for a long time. Alright, so the issue is just rationalizing it and making it on par with what goes on in the real world. If that is found to be true, and I mean, there are also other ways to approach it to a certain sense. Right? I mean, you can find 1,001 loopholes to a certain sense, of course. I think the amount of resourcing that you get as a company is very different. The amount of influence, especially when you have contracts in place, very different as well. Then of course there's the black market at the back. So once you become a company, you sell advertisements. The contracts become more lucrative, right? Because there is money at stake. There is a difference between, say, an influence and credibility a company brings once it's a blending, compared to, say, an individual. Of course, there could be exceptions, but as of now, we've not seen it yet. And I suppose with the regulators, I suppose they will adjust accordingly if and when such a situation happens. But as of now, I don't suppose there is a need. But you would find more of a threat of interference coming from a company more likely than an individual. I think the bottom line is this. Today, whether new media or old media, I think the situation also remains the same. It is still possible both ways then and now. Foreign interference could be damaging, especially to a small state like Singapore that relies heavily on political stability.